No one ever dared to speak to Don Rafael Moretti like that. Not the police. Not rival gangsters. Not even the men who feared him enough to die for him. But that night inside a quiet restaurant in Naples, a 23-year-old waitress, trembling, humiliated yet unbroken, looked straight into the eyes of Italy's most feared mafia boss and said, "No man mistreats me and goes scot-free, not even you." The room went silent. Glasses froze midair. And for the first time in years, Raphael felt something no bullet had ever given him: fear. He thought it was just anger. But days later, when his empire began to collapse piece by piece, he realized it wasn't fate. It was her. Hey everyone, before we fully dive into this story, I need to know where you are watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments right now. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now because you don't want to miss any stories we share here. Now let's get into the story. The silence in Trattoria del Vesuvio wasn't just quiet. It was the kind of silence that comes before an execution. Every fork froze midair. Every conversation died. Every pair of eyes locked onto table 7, where Lucia stood with an empty tray trembling in her hands, and Raphael Moretti rose from his chair like a verdict taking human form. He was tall, over 6 feet of controlled violence, wrapped in a suit that cost more than her entire year's rent. His face was carved from marble, all sharp angles and cold authority. His eyes, gray as winter seas, swept over her with the emotional investment of a man examining a stain on his shoe, which technically she was. "Look at this," he said, his voice quiet but carrying across the frozen restaurant like a judge reading a sentence. He gestured to the wine soaking into the fabric. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Lucia's mouth went dry. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought it might crack them. "Signore, I am so sorry. It was an accident." The other waiter, he bumped. "I don't care about your excuses," Raphael cut her off, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. He stepped closer, towering over her, invading her space until all she could smell was expensive cologne and danger. "This suit costs more than you'll make in a year of serving pasta to tourists. This meeting you interrupted? Worth more than this entire building and everyone in it." The men at his table, hard-faced, dead-eyed men with their hands resting too close to their jacket pockets, watched her like wolves sizing up prey. Raphael's lip curled into something that might have been a smile on a different man but looked like a threat on him. "You're pathetic. A clumsy little nothing who can't even carry a tray without causing a scene." He leaned down, his face inches from hers, and she could see the absolute certainty in his eyes that she was beneath him, insignificant, already erased. "Get the manager. Now. I want you fired. I don't ever want to see your face in this city again." The humiliation hit her like a physical blow. Pathetic. Nothing. The words echoed in her skull, bouncing off the walls of her mind where older, deeper wounds still bled. She saw it on the faces around her. Pity, fear, morbid fascination. They were watching her public execution, and they were grateful it wasn't them. She should have apologized again. Should have run. Should have done exactly what he commanded, because that's what people did when Raphael Moretti spoke. They obeyed. Or they died. But Lucia Romano had been dead before. 10 years ago, she died when 2 men in dark suits came to her door and told her 17-year-old self that her father wasn't coming home. Ever. That detective Antonio Romano had been found in the harbor with 3 bullets in his chest. That it was a tragedy. That there was nothing they could do. She died again when she found out the truth, that he'd been undercover, that he'd been close to bringing down the Moretti family, that he'd been betrayed and murdered and dumped like garbage. She died a 3rd time when she realized no one was going to get justice for him, so she'd stopped being dead and started being something else. Something harder. Something that had spent a decade preparing for this exact moment. The trembling in her hands stopped. The heat of shame on her cheeks transformed into something hotter, something ancient and righteous. She straightened her spine, inch by inch, lifting her chin until she was looking Raphael Moretti directly in his cold, sharp eyes. The silence deepened. Someone gasped. "No," Lucia said. One word. Clear. Steady. Final. Raphael's expression flickered, just for a microsecond, with something that might have been surprise. His men shifted, hands moving inside jackets. Lucia took a step forward, closing the distance he'd used to intimidate her, turning his own tactic against him. I will not get the manager. You will not get me fired. Her voice was steel-wrapped in silk. You will accept my apology for the accident, but you will never speak to me like that again. The restaurant wasn't breathing anymore. This wasn't defiance. This was a death wish being spoken out loud. She leaned in closer, her dark eyes burning into his, and delivered the words that would change both their lives forever. I learned something a long time ago, she said, her voice low and fierce and meant for him but heard by everyone. No man mistreats me and goes scot-free. She let each word land like a hammer. Not even you. Raphael Moretti stood frozen. The most feared man in Naples, the king of an empire built on blood and terror, had just been threatened by a waitress in front of his entire organization. His face was unreadable, but something flickered in those winter-gray eyes. Not just rage. Something else. Something dangerous and unexpected and infinitely more complicated. The walk back to her tiny apartment in the Quartiere Spagnoli should have felt like a victory lap. It didn't. Lucia's hands were still shaking as she climbed the narrow, graffiti-covered stairwell to the 4th floor. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation now draining away, leaving behind a cold, gnawing reality. She had just threatened Raphael Moretti. Out loud. In front of his men. In front of everyone. Her keys rattled against the lock as she fumbled to open the door. The apartment was dark, illuminated only by the neon glow of the street below filtering through thin curtains. It was a cramped space, one bedroom, a kitchenette that barely fit a stove, and a living area dominated by a second-hand couch and a small wooden table covered in papers, photographs, and maps. You're late, came a voice from the shadows. Lucia jumped, her hand flying to her chest. Cristo, Elena. You scared me half to death. A figure emerged from the corner, flicking on a dim lamp. Elena Durden was sprawled on the couch, her long legs draped over the armrest, a half-eaten sandwich in one hand and a knowing smirk on her face. She was Lucia's roommate, confidant, and the only person in the world who knew the truth about why Lucia Romano had come to Naples. Elena was all sharp edges and sharper instincts. A former investigative journalist who'd been forced underground after exposing the wrong politician's connection to organized crime. She had contacts everywhere, a mind like a steel trap, and a loyalty to Lucia that ran bone deep. Half to death. Elena raised an eyebrow. From what I heard, you already used up all 9 of your lives tonight. Lucia froze. How do you already know? Sweetie, you threatened Don Raphael Moretti in a room full of people. Elena sat up, her expression shifting from amusement to concern. That news traveled faster than a wildfire. I've gotten 3 calls in the last hour. People want to know who the crazy waitress with the death wish is. Lucia dropped her bag and sank into the chair across from Elena, her face falling into her hands. I didn't plan it. He humiliated me. Called me pathetic, insignificant. He was going to have me fired like I was nothing. Her voice cracked. And I saw red. Elena leaned forward, her voice softening. Lucia, you saw your father. The words hit like a physical blow. Lucia looked up, her eyes glistening. Is that so wrong? He talked to me the way they talked to my papa. Like he was disposable. Like his life meant nothing. 10 years. It had been 10 years since Detective Antonio Romano kissed his daughter goodbye, told her he'd be home for her 18th birthday, and walked out the door for the last time. 17-year-old Lucia had waited all day, the cake sitting on the table, candles ready. He never came. Instead, 2 grim-faced officers arrived with words that shattered her world. Missing. Then 3 days later found. Dead. We're sorry. But Lucia had learned the real story. Her father had been deep undercover, infiltrating the Moretti organization. He'd been close, so close, to gathering enough evidence to bring down the entire empire. Then someone betrayed him. Someone on the inside. and Rafael Moretti's men had executed him, dumping his body in the bay like garbage. No arrests. No justice. The case went cold within months. That was the day Lucia stopped being a girl and became a weapon. Your father would be proud of you, Elena said quietly, gesturing to the table covered in Lucia's meticulous research. Look at, then I'll be ready. Lucia stood, a fierce determination settling over her features. I didn't come this far to run away now. Elena studied her for a long moment, then sighed. You're just like your father. Stubborn. Fearless. Reckless. She reached out and squeezed Lucia's hand. And that's exactly what got him killed. The words hung heavy in the air. Lucia squeezed back. Then I'll make sure his death meant something. Across the city, in a penthouse overlooking the bay, Rafael Moretti stood at floor-to-ceiling windows, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. The lights of Naples sprawled below him like a kingdom, because that's what it was. His kingdom. Built by his grandfather, expanded by his father, and perfected by him. He should have been thinking about the meeting he'd had tonight. About the shipment that had mysteriously vanished. About the growing unease among his captains. About the fact that someone somewhere was bold enough to move against him. Instead, he was thinking about a waitress. Brown eyes that had stared him down without flinching. A voice that hadn't trembled when she delivered her threat. The audacity of it. The sheer reckless courage. No man mistreats me and goes scot-free. His reflection in the glass showed nothing, the same composed mask he'd worn since childhood. But inside, something unfamiliar stirred. Curiosity, perhaps. Or recognition. Of what he wasn't sure yet. Behind him, his consigliere Vincent Loomis cleared his throat. Don Moretti, about the girl. Lucia Romano, Rafael said, not turning around. He'd already had her background checked. 27 years old. Orphaned at 17. Worked 3 jobs. No criminal record. Nothing remarkable. Nothing that explained the fire in her eyes. Do you want her dealt with? Vincent asked carefully. Rafael finally turned. Vincent was a small, precise man with wire-rimmed glasses and the soul of an accountant. He'd been with the family for 30 years and had orchestrated more deaths than Rafael cared to count, all with the same mild, businesslike demeanor. No, Rafael said. Vincent's eyebrows rose a fraction, the equivalent of shocked disbelief. Signore, she disrespected you in front of. I know what she did. Rafael set down his glass with a soft click. I want to know why. Why? People who act like that are either insane or have nothing to lose. Rafael's eyes narrowed. Find out which one she is. Vincent nodded and turned to leave, but Rafael's voice stopped him. And Vincent? I want to see her again. Arrange it. When he was alone again, Rafael returned to the window. Somewhere out there in the sprawling city below was a waitress who had looked at him like he was just a man. Not a don. Not a king. Just a man who could bleed. It had been a very long time since anyone had made that mistake. And for reasons he couldn't explain, Rafael Moretti needed to understand her. Before he decided whether to destroy her or keep her. What neither of them knew yet was that their collision had set in motion a sequence of events that would unravel secrets buried for a decade, expose betrayals that ran to the very heart of the empire, and force them both to choose between revenge and something far more dangerous, the possibility of redemption. The 24 hours between the text message and 8 p.m. felt like 24 years. Lucia spent the day in a fog of preparation and anxiety. Elena had insisted on a plan, multiple exit strategies, a panic button app on her phone, a small canister of pepper spray tucked into her purse. If anything feels wrong, you run, Elena had said, gripping Lucia's shoulders. Promise me. Lucia had promised. But they both knew she was lying. Now, standing outside Trattoria del Vesuvio at 7:58 p.m., Lucia took a breath that did nothing to steady her racing heart. She'd chosen her clothing carefully. A simple black dress that was elegant but not provocative, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, minimal makeup. She wanted to look composed, professional. like someone who hadn't spent the entire previous night wondering if she was walking into her own execution. The maitre d' Giorgio recognized her immediately. His face went white. "Signorina Romano," he stammered. You're expected." Of course she was. He led her through the restaurant, past tables of diners who looked up with curious, knowing eyes. Word had spread. The waitress who defied Don Moretti. She could feel their stares like pinpricks on her skin. Table 7 was in the back corner, partially concealed by a decorative screen, private but not completely isolated. Strategic. Raphael Moretti sat alone, his presence commanding the space even in stillness. He wore a different suit tonight, charcoal gray, impeccably tailored, and he watched her approach with an expression that gave away absolutely nothing. Giorgio pulled out her chair. Lucia sat, her spine straight, her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Raphael simply studied her, his gray eyes moving across her face like he was reading a document, looking for the fine print. "You came," he said finally. "You summoned," Lucia replied, proud that her voice didn't shake. "I assumed refusing wasn't an option." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You didn't seem concerned with your options last night." "Last night was a mistake." "Was it?" He leaned back slightly, his fingers drumming once on the white tablecloth. "Which part? Spilling wine on me, or threatening me in front of my associates?" Lucia lifted her chin. "The wine was an accident. The rest." She met his gaze. "I meant every word." She expected anger, threats. Instead, Raphael laughed, a short, genuine sound that transformed his face for a fraction of a second, making him look younger, almost human. "You're either the bravest woman I've ever met, or the most foolish." He signaled to a waiter, who appeared instantly with a bottle of wine. Not Chianti this time, but something that probably cost more than Lucia's monthly rent. "I haven't decided which yet." The waiter poured for both of them and vanished like smoke. "Why am I here?" Lucia asked, not touching her glass. "Because I'm curious." Raphael picked up his wine, swirling it gently. "People don't speak to me the way you did. Not if they want to continue breathing. Yet you it me." The command in his voice left no room for argument. Lucia climbed into the SUV. Raphael slid in beside her, and the vehicle was moving before the door fully closed, tires screeching as they pulled away from the chaos. In the confined space, Lucia became acutely aware of him. The smell of gunpowder and expensive cologne, the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched as he looked out the window at the burning restaurant behind them. "Where are you taking me?" she asked quietly. "Somewhere safe." He finally looked at her, and something in his expression had shifted. The calculated curiosity from before had been replaced by something more intense, more personal. "Until I figure out what's happening, you're under my protection." "I don't want your protection. You don't have a choice." His voice was firm but not unkind. "Someone just declared war. Whether you like it or not, you're in the middle of it now." Lucia's mind reeled. This was spiraling out of control. She needed to contact Elena, needed to think, needed to figure out how to turn this disaster into an opportunity. But as she sat in the dark SUV next to the man she'd sworn to destroy, she felt the foundation of her carefully laid plans beginning to crack. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that the explosion hadn't been random, that someone had specifically waited until she and Raphael were together, that this was just the opening move in a game far more complex and deadly than she'd imagined, and that Raphael Moretti, watching her profile in the dim light as Naples flashed past the windows, was beginning to suspect that Lucia Romano was far more than she appeared to be. The safe house wasn't what Lucia expected. She'd imagined something dark and industrial. A warehouse, maybe, or a grim apartment in some forgotten corner of the city. Instead, the SUV pulled up to a villa on the outskirts of Naples, perched on a hillside with views of the bay glittering under the moonlight. It was beautiful in an understated way. Old stone, ivy-covered walls, wrought iron gates that whispered of old money and older secrets. Raphael's hand was on the small of her back as he guided her inside. A possessive gesture that made her stiffen. He noticed and dropped his hand, but the awareness lingered on her skin like a brand. The interior was surprisingly warm. Exposed wooden beams, comfortable furniture, walls lined with books. Not the cold showpiece she'd expected, but a place where someone actually lived. "You'll stay here tonight," Raphael said, shrugging out of his jacket. The blood on his sleeve was more visible now. "Vincent is posting guards around the perimeter. You'll be safe." "I need to go home," Lucia protested. "My roommate will be worried. I have work tomorrow. I can't just." "Your roommate has already been contacted." Raphael loosened his tie, and Lucia tried not to notice the way the movement drew attention to his throat, the strong line of his jaw. "One of my people called the restaurant on your behalf. As far as the world is concerned, you're recovering from the shock of the attack." Lucia's blood ran cold. "You had someone contact Elena? What did they tell her?" "That you're safe and we'll be in touch soon." Raphael's eyes narrowed. "Why? Is there something your roommate should know that I don't?" "No," Lucia said too quickly. I don't like people making decisions for me." "I noticed." A hint of amusement crossed his features. "You've made that abundantly clear." A woman appeared from the hallway, older, gray-haired, with kind eyes and a maternal air. "Don Moretti, I've prepared the guest room. Does the signorina need anything? Clean clothes? Something to eat?" "Both, thank you, Maria." Raphael's voice softened when he spoke to her. "And medical supplies. Minor cuts, nothing serious." It was only then that Lucia realized her hands were scraped, her palms embedded with tiny shards of glass from when she'd hit the floor. She'd been running on adrenaline, not feeling the pain. Maria tutted and approached Lucia with the confidence of someone who'd known Raphael since childhood and wasn't afraid of him. "Come, Cara. Let's get you cleaned up. Men never notice these things properly." Lucia let herself be led down a hallway to a bedroom that was larger than her entire apartment. Maria disappeared and returned with a first aid kit and a silk nightgown. "I'll bring you some clothes in the morning. For now, wash up and I'll tend to your hands." 20 minutes later, Lucia sat on the edge of the bed in the borrowed nightgown, watching Maria's gentle, practiced hands pick glass from her palms with tweezers. The older woman worked in comfortable silence before finally speaking. "He's not what you think, you know," Maria said quietly. Lucia looked up sharply. "I don't. I've worked for the Moretti family for 40 years. I raised that boy from the time he was 8 years old." Maria applied antiseptic with a cotton swab, her expression distant with memory. "Everyone sees the Don, the criminal. But I see the child who cried when his mother died, who reads philosophy in the middle of the night when he can't sleep, who makes sure every family on this hill has food for Christmas. That doesn't erase what he is," Lucia said, but her voice lacked conviction. "No," Maria agreed, wrapping gauze around Lucia's palm. "But it means he's more than what he is. We all are." She tied off the bandage and looked Lucia directly in the eye. "He's protected you tonight. That means something. In this world, protection is sacred." After Maria left, Lucia sat in the quiet room, her mind churning. She needed to contact Elena, needed to figure out what the explosion meant for her plans, needed to maintain the distance between her and Raphael that was already dangerously eroding. But she was exhausted, and the bed was impossibly soft, and despite everything, she felt safer here than she had in months. She hated herself for it. Sleep didn't come easily, and when it did, it was filled with dreams of fire and her father's face. Downstairs, Raphael stood in his study, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand braced against the window frame. 4 dead, 7 injured, Vincent reported. The attackers were professionals. No identification on the bodies, but Antonio is running prints and dental records. "Theories?" Raphael demanded. "Plenty. You've made enemies. The Calabrese family is still angry about the port incident last month. The Albanians might be making a move. Or it could be internal, someone positioning for a power grab." Raphael's jaw tightened. "What about the girl?" A pause. What about her? Is she connected? Could she have been the target? She's a waitress, Don Moretti. Nobody. But there was something in Vincent's voice, a hesitation that made Raphael's instincts flare. Then why do I feel like I'm missing something? Raphael turned from the window. Pull everything on her again. Deeper this time. Friends, family, employment history. I want to know what brand of coffee she drinks and what books she reads. Understood. There's one more thing. What? We lost contact with Paolo and Stefano. They were supposed to report in from the warehouse at midnight. Nothing. Raphael's blood chilled. Paolo and Stefano were veterans, loyal, careful. Send a team. Already done. They found blood. Signs of a struggle. The men are gone. 2 missing men. A restaurant bombing. And a waitress who appeared out of nowhere 4 months ago with fire in her eyes and secrets in her past. The pieces didn't fit together yet, but Raphael knew a pattern when he saw one. Something was happening to his organization, and somehow impossibly, it had all started the night Lucia Romano spilled wine on his jacket. He ended the call and poured himself a drink, but he didn't taste it. His mind kept returning to the way Lucia had looked in the restaurant. That moment of genuine fear when the explosion hit, followed by determination. The way she'd argued about coming with him even as bullets flew. The way she'd looked at him, not with the calculating fear most people showed, but with something closer to hatred? No. Hatred was too simple. It was personal hatred. The kind that came from somewhere deep and specific. His phone buzzed with a text from Vincent. Preliminary report on Lucia Romano's father attached. Raphael opened the file, and the first line made his blood freeze. Antonio Romano. Detective. Naples Police Department. Deceased. He read further, his expression darkening with each line. Undercover operation. The Moretti organization. Killed 10 years ago. Raphael's father had been Don then. Raphael had been 23, being groomed to take over, learning the business but not yet fully in control. He remembered hearing about a rat, about his father's rage, about the execution that sent a message. He'd never asked the details. He'd never cared. Now, staring at the photograph of Detective Antonio Romano, a man with kind eyes and a strong jaw, features that echoed in his daughter's face, Raphael felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Guilt? No. He'd never ordered the hit, never pulled the trigger. But his name was on the door of the empire that had. Upstairs, the daughter of a murdered cop slept under his roof, wrapped in his protection, her secrets hidden behind walls of careful planning and decade-old grief. And Raphael Moretti, who'd built his life on control and certainty, suddenly realized he was in very dangerous territory. Lucia woke to voices arguing outside her door. Absolutely cannot see her right now. It's 3 a.m. I don't care what time it is. I need to speak with Don Moretti, and I need to speak with him now. That second voice was female, younger, and absolutely furious. Lucia crept to the door and opened it a crack. In the hallway, Maria was blocking the path of a striking woman in her mid-20s, tall, elegant, with a kind of natural authority that came from privilege and power. Her designer clothes were perfect despite the hour, her black hair cascading over her shoulders. Isabella, please, Maria pleaded. He's in an important meeting. The attack tonight is exactly why I'm here. Isabella's dark eyes flashed. Someone tries to kill my fiancé, and I have to hear about it on the news? Where is he, Maria? Fiancé. The word hit Lucia like a slap. Of course Raphael Moretti had a fiancé. Men like him always did strategic marriages, alliances between families, women who understood the rules of their world. Why did that information make her stomach twist? Before Maria could respond, Raphael appeared at the top of the stairs. Isabella, what are you doing here? Isabella turned, and her expression shifted from anger to relief to something calculating. Raphael, thank God you're all right. She moved toward him, reaching for his hands, but he stepped back slightly, a subtle rejection that Lucia noticed even if Isabella pretended not to. I'm fine. You shouldn't have come. Of course I came. You were nearly killed. Isabella's gaze swept past him and landed on Lucia, standing in the doorway in a silk nightgown, her hair disheveled from sleep. Isabella's eyes went cold. And who is this? Raphael's jaw tightened. A witness who needed protection. A witness. Isabella's tone could have cut glass. And she needs to stay in your private villa? In the middle of the night? Raphael, do you have any idea how this looks? I don't care how it looks. Raphael's voice was flat, final. She was targeted because of me. That makes her my responsibility. Lucia had heard enough. She stepped fully into the hallway, lifting her chin. I didn't ask for his protection. And I'll be leaving in the morning. Isabella looked her up and down with barely concealed disdain. Yes, you will. Isabella, that's enough, Raphael warned. Is it? Isabella turned on him. Your empire is falling apart, Raphael. Men are disappearing. Shipments are being intercepted. And now someone's bold enough to attack you in public. You should be figuring out who's betraying you. Not playing hero to some waitress. The contempt in her voice when she said waitress made Lucia's hands clench into fists. Raphael's expression went dangerously cold. Maria, please escort Isabella out. Raphael. Now. Isabella's face flushed with anger and humiliation, but she was smart enough to know when she'd been dismissed. She shot Lucia one last venomous look before Maria gently but firmly guided her toward the stairs. The silence that followed was thick and uncomfortable. Raphael and Lucia stood in the hallway, 5 feet apart, the air between them crackling with tension. Your fiancé seems lovely, Lucia said, unable to keep the edge from her voice. It's a business arrangement, Raphael replied. Nothing more. Does she know that? What Isabella knows or doesn't know isn't your concern. He moved closer, and Lucia was reminded again of how tall he was, how his presence seemed to fill whatever space he occupied. What concerns me is why you were so quick to announce you're leaving. Because I don't belong here. Because you're afraid. The accusation stung because it was partially true, but not in the way he thought. I'm not afraid of you, Lucia said. No. Raphael's eyes searched her face. But you're afraid of something. I can see it. Every time you look at me, there's something in your eyes. Anger. Grief. He paused. Recognition. Lucia's heart hammered. You're imagining things. Am I? He was close enough now that she could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes, could count his heartbeats in the pulse at his throat. Who are you really, Lucia Romano? And why do I feel like I should know you? She needed to deflect, to retreat, to put distance between them before he saw too much. But she was frozen, caught in the gravity of him, in the dangerous pull of the moment. You don't know me, she whispered. And you never will. Before he could respond, before she could do something catastrophically stupid, she turned and went back into her room, closing the door between them. On the other side, Raphael stood in the hallway for a long moment, his mind racing with pieces that didn't quite fit but were beginning to form a picture he didn't want to see. A dead cop. A daughter who appeared out of nowhere. An empire under attack. And a woman who looked at him with eyes that burned with purpose. Lucia didn't sleep the rest of the night. She sat on the edge of the bed, her burner phone clutched in her bandaged hands, the one Elena had given her months ago, the one that couldn't be traced. She'd hidden it in the lining of her purse, and miraculously, it had survived the chaos. At 4 a.m. she finally risked a text. I'm okay. Moretti's safe house. Can't talk. Situation escalating. Elena's response came within seconds. Thank God. Lucia, the explosion is all over the news. 7 dead. They're calling it a gang war. You need to get out of there. I can't. Not yet. Be suspicious. Then abort. We always knew this was a risk. Your life is worth more than revenge. Lucia stared at those words for a long moment. Was it? For 10 years, revenge had been the only thing keeping her alive. The only thing that made her father's death mean something. I'm close, Elena. His empire is crumbling. Someone's making moves against him. If I can find out who, I can use it. Or you could get caught in the crossfire. I'll be careful. Promise. She powered off the phone before Elena could argue further, and hid it back in her purse. Through the window she watched the sun rise over the bay, painting the water in shades of gold and pink. Beautiful. Deceptive. Like everything else in this city. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Signorina. Maria's voice came through the door. I have clothes for you. And Don Moretti asks if you'll join him for breakfast. Asks. As if she had a choice. 30 minutes later, Lucia descended the stairs wearing borrowed clothes. Designer jeans that fit perfectly and a soft cream sweater that probably cost a month's salary. Maria had good taste and an eerily accurate sense of her size. Raphael was on the terrace, a spread of breakfast foods laid out on a wrought iron table. He'd changed into casual clothes, dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms that were more muscled than his suits suggested. He looked younger in the morning light, less like a crime lord and more like a man. A dangerous thought. Good morning, he said, gesturing to the seat across from him. I hope you slept well. I didn't. Lucia sat, accepting the coffee Maria poured for her. Your fiancé's midnight visit made sure of that. Isabella isn't usually so. Raphael searched for the word. Territorial. A slight smile. I was going to say dramatic, but territorial works. He studied her over his coffee cup. She has no claim on me beyond a contract our families signed when we were children. It means nothing. Does she know that? She should. I've told her enough times. Raphael set down his cup. But we're not here to discuss Isabella. We're here to discuss you. Lucia's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression neutral. What about me? Last night I asked you a question. Who are you really? His gray eyes were sharp, assessing. I'd like an answer. I'm exactly who I appear to be. A waitress who had the misfortune of. Your father was Detective Antonio Romano. Raphael's voice was quiet but cut through her words like a blade. He was undercover in my father's organization 10 years ago. He was discovered and executed. The world tilted. Lucia's coffee cup rattled against the saucer as she set it down. Her hands suddenly numb. How did you? I'm not an idiot, Lucia. The moment you challenged me, I knew you were more than you seemed. So I looked deeper. Raphael leaned forward, his expression unreadable. You've been in Naples for 4 months. You specifically got a job at my favorite restaurant. You've been watching me, documenting my movements. He paused. You're here for revenge. Lucia's mind raced. Deny it? Run? Attack? Every instinct screamed different directions, but she forced herself to stay still, to meet his eyes. Yes, she said finally, and the admission felt like stepping off a cliff. I'm here for revenge. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Raphael's jaw tightened. So the wine. The confrontation. All of it was planned. The wine was an accident, Lucia corrected, finding her voice, finding her anger. But the rest? Yes. I wanted you to notice me. I wanted to get close to you. I wanted to find evidence that would put you away for the rest of your life. And then what? Raphael's voice was dangerously soft. Turn it over to the police? The same police who buried your father's case within months? Who took money from my family for generations? I would have found a way, Lucia shot back. I've been planning this for 10 years. 10 years of learning everything about you. About your organization. About the man whose family murdered my father in cold blood. She stood abruptly, the chair scraping against stone. So yes, Don Moretti. I'm here for revenge. And if you're going to kill me for it, then do it. But don't expect me to apologize for wanting justice for a good man who was butchered, because he dared to stand up to you. Her chest was heaving, her eyes burning with tears she refused to let fall. She waited for his rage, for him to signal his men, for this to finally be over. Instead, Raphael stood slowly and said the last thing she expected. I didn't know. Lucia blinked. What? I didn't know about your father. Not then. Raphael's voice was strained. His expression conflicted in a way she'd never seen. 10 years ago I was 23. My father was still Don. I was learning the business, yes, but I wasn't making those decisions. I wasn't even told about the rat until after it was handled. That doesn't absolve you, Lucia said, but her voice cracked. You inherited his empire. You've built on it. Every crime, every victim. You own all of it. I know. The admission seemed to cost him something. I know what I am, Lucia. I know what my family has done. I've made my peace with it because this world doesn't give men like me alternatives. You're born into this, or you marry into it, or you die trying to escape it. He moved closer and Lucia's back hit the terrace railing. But I also know, Raphael continued, his voice dropping to something raw and honest, that if I had known your father was a good cop, an honest man just trying to do his job, I would have tried to stop it. My father and we didn't agree on many things. He believed in fear and brutality. I believe in strategy and control. Pretty words, Lucia whispered, hating how much she wanted to believe them. But they don't bring him back. No. Raphael was close enough now that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight he carried. Nothing brings the dead back. Trust me, I know. I've buried enough people. For a moment they stood there, predator and prey, enemy and enemy, separated by a history of violence and bound by it just the same. Then Raphael's phone shattered the moment with a harsh ring. He answered it, his expression darkening as he listened. When? Both of them. Don't touch anything. I'm on my way. He hung up and looked at Lucia with an expression she couldn't read. Get in the car. Why? What happened? 2 more of my men are dead. And this time they left a message. His voice was ice. Someone wants me to know they're coming for everything I have. The warehouse was on the industrial edge of Naples, a sprawling structure that smelled of salt and rust and something darker. Raphael's men had secured the perimeter, their faces grim as Raphael strode through with Lucia beside him. He'd refused to leave her at the villa, claiming she was safer where he could see her. Vincent met them at the entrance, his usually composed expression cracked with something close to fear. Don Moretti, I must warn you. It's bad. Show me. They walked through the warehouse to a small office in the back. 2 bodies lay on the floor, both men Lucia vaguely recognized from the restaurant. But it wasn't the bodies that made her gasp. It was the wall behind them. Beneath it, pinned with a knife, was a photograph. Lucia's blood turned to ice as she recognized it. It was her father, Detective Antonio Romano in his police uniform, smiling at the camera. Cristo, Vincent breathed. What does this mean? But Lucia and Raphael were staring at each other, the same terrible realization dawning on both their faces. This isn't about your empire, Lucia whispered. It's about my father. Someone knows who you are, Raphael said, his mind visibly racing. Someone knows you're here, knows what you're planning, and they're using it. But who? No one knows except, Lucia's voice died. Elena. Only Elena knew everything. No, it was impossible. Elena was her best friend, her only ally, the person who'd helped her plan this whole operation. Raphael's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. He opened it and his face went white. He turned the screen toward Lucia. The photo showed Elena, tied to a chair in an unfamiliar room, blood trickling from her temple. Below it a message. You took something from me. Now I'll take everything from you. Both of you. V. Lucia whispered, her mind spinning. Vincent. But when they turned, Vincent was staring at the phone with what looked like genuine shock. That's not, I would never. Then who? Raphael demanded. A voice came from the shadows of the warehouse, cold and familiar and impossible. Hello, Raphael. It's been a long time. A figure stepped into the light, and Lucia's world shattered. The man was in his 50s, silver-haired and distinguished, with eyes that were a mirror of Raphael's. He wore an expensive suit and a smile that was pure poison. Uncle Vittorio, Raphael breathed, his gun appearing in his hand in one smooth motion. You're supposed to be dead. Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated. Vittorio Moretti's smile widened. Necessary, though. How else could I dismantle your empire from the shadows? How else could I take back what should have been mine? The attacks. The missing men. The shipments. Raphael's voice was deadly calm. It was you. All along. Every bit of it. Vittorio's gaze slid to Lucia, and something cruel glinted in his eyes. But I had help. You see, when this lovely young woman started poking around my organization, yes, my organization, the one I've been building in the shadows for years, I did some digging of my own. Imagine my delight when I discovered she was Antonio Romano's daughter. Lucia's blood ran cold. How did you? I'm the one who ordered your father's death, child. Vittorio's voice was casual, discussing murder like a business transaction. He was getting too close, asking too many questions. I was my brother's consigliere back then, and I protected the family. Just like I'm protecting it now by removing the nephew who stole my birthright. You're insane, Raphael said. I didn't steal anything. My father chose me as his heir. Because you were his son. Vittorio's composure cracked, rage bleeding through. I was his brother. I built this empire with him from nothing, and he gave it to a boy who didn't have the stomach for what needed to be done. So you faked your death and spent a decade plotting revenge? Raphael's grip on his gun was white-knuckled. Where's her friend? Where's Elena? Oh, the journalist? Vittorio chuckled. She's alive. For now. Bait, you see. Because here's the beautiful part of my plan. You two are going to destroy each other. He pulled out a phone and pressed a button. A screen on the wall flickered to life, showing Elena in real time, bound and gagged. A timer counting down above her head. You have a choice, Vittorio said. The location is uploading to your phone now. You can save the girl. But to get to her, you'll have to go through a building I've filled with my men and enough explosives to level a city block. The moment you enter, the timer accelerates. You'll have 10 minutes. That's not enough time, Raphael said. No, Vittorio agreed. It's not. Not for both of you to make it out alive. His eyes glittered with malice. So you'll have to choose. Save yourselves or save her. The daughter of the cop gets to see if the crime lord she hates will die for her friend. And you, nephew, get to prove what kind of man you really are. He started backing toward a rear exit. Oh, and Lucia? Your father didn't die well. He begged. He cried. He called out your name. I thought you should know that. Lucia lunged forward, a scream of rage tearing from her throat, but Raphael caught her, holding her back as Vittorio disappeared into the shadows. Let me go. Lucia struggled against him. I'll kill him. Lucia, stop. Raphael spun her to face him, his hands gripping her shoulders. We don't have time. We have to make a choice. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face, and saw the same impossible calculation in his eyes that was tearing through her mind. Raphael's phone showed the address. 30 minutes away. The timer on the screen showed 25 minutes remaining. We can make it, Lucia said desperately. We go now, we move fast. It's a trap designed to kill us all, Raphael said. He's counted on every variable. The traffic, the building layout, the explosives. He's been planning this for years. I don't care. Lucia's voice broke. Elena is in there because of me. Because I dragged her into this. I won't let her die. Raphael stared at her, something shifting behind his eyes. A decision being made. A line being crossed. Then we don't play by his rules, he said. Vincent. Vincent appeared, shaken but ready. Yes, Don Moretti? Call everyone. Every man we have. I want teams at this address in 15 minutes. Evacuate the surrounding buildings. Get the bomb squad, the fire department. I don't care what laws we break or who we have to pay off. Raphael, there's no time to coordinate, Vincent started. Then we make time. Raphael's voice was steel. And call Isabella's father. Tell him I'm calling in the alliance. I need his men too. He looked down at Lucia, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw not the Don, not the criminal, but just a man making an impossible choice. I'm going to save your friend, he said quietly. And then you and I are going to end my uncle together. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Lucia searched his face, her mind warring with her heart. This man's family had killed her father. This man represented everything she'd sworn to destroy. But this man was also the only chance Elena had. And somewhere in the last 48 hours, he'd become something more than just her enemy. Yes, she whispered. I trust you. The words felt like a betrayal and a revelation all at once. Raphael nodded once, then turned to his men, transformation into the dawn. Move. Now. We have 23 minutes to do the impossible. As they raced toward the cars, Lucia's mind spun with the revelations crashing over her like waves. Vittorio had killed her father. Vittorio was behind everything. And Raphael, the man she'd spent 10 years hating, was risking everything to save someone who meant nothing to him but everything to her. The foundations of her decade-long quest for revenge were crumbling, and in their place, something far more complicated and dangerous was taking root. Something that felt dangerously close to faith. 3 days after the explosion, everything fell apart. Lucia sat in the villa's living room, her hands trembling as she watched the news report. Elena's face filled the screen. A photograph from her journalism days, smiling and vibrant. The headline beneath made Lucia's world collapse. Journalist found dead in apparent suicide. No, Lucia whispered, the word breaking on a sob. No, no, no. Raphael stood across the room, his phone pressed to his ear, his expression carved from stone. He ended the call and looked at her with something that might have been pity. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Sorry. Lucia's voice cracked as she stood, rage and grief warring in her chest. You're sorry? She's dead because of me. Because I got close to you, because someone knows. She stopped, catching herself, but it was too late. Raphael's eyes narrowed. Knows what, Lucia? Before she could answer, Vincent burst through the door, his usually composed face pale. Don Moretti, we have a problem. Someone leaked the security codes. The warehouse was hit. 15 million in product gone. And... He hesitated, glancing at Lucia. There's a witness claiming you ordered it. That's insane, Raphael said. The authorities are on their way. Someone's framing you. Vincent's jaw tightened. Sir, it's all falling apart. Raphael's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and his face went white. He turned it toward Lucia. A photograph. Her father's badge. A message. She's been playing you from the start. Ask her about Antonio Romano. Lucia's blood turned to ice as Raphael's eyes locked onto hers. No longer curious, no longer warm. Cold. Calculating. Betrayed. Is it true? His voice was deadly quiet. Antonio Romano. The detective my family killed. Is he your father? The silence stretched like a chasm between them. Yes, Lucia whispered, tears streaming down her face. He was my father. Raphael stepped back as if she'd struck him. Everything. The wine. The defiance. All of it was a lie. Not all of it, Lucia said desperately. Raphael, I came here for revenge, yes, but... Get out. His voice was ice. Get out of my house. Out of my city. If I ever see you again, I won't be responsible for what happens. Please just listen. You used me. You used my protection while plotting my destruction. His hands were shaking with barely controlled rage. Your friend's death is on your hands, not mine. This war you started, you did this. Vincent's men appeared in the doorway. Raphael nodded to them. Escort her out. Make sure she's on the first train out of Naples. As they pulled her toward the door, Lucia looked back one last time. Raphael had turned away, his shoulders rigid, his hands braced against the window. The same pose she'd seen that first night, but now she knew she'd never stand beside him there again. She'd lost everything. Elena was dead. Raphael hated her. And somewhere out there, the real enemy was winning. The darkest hour had come, and Lucia Romano was utterly, completely alone. The train station was chaos. Crowds pushing, announcements blaring, the smell of diesel and desperation. Lucia sat on a bench clutching a single bag, her eyes hollow, her world reduced to ashes. Elena was dead. Raphael had cast her out. 10 years of planning destroyed. She should get on the train. Leave Naples. Disappear like she'd always planned if things went wrong. But something nagged at her. Something about the photograph Raphael had received. Her father's badge, she'd seen it before, in the evidence box the police had given her. It had been lost years ago, or so she'd been told. Who had it now? Who was orchestrating all of this? Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Lucia Romano. The voice was male, older, cultured. We haven't been properly introduced. My name is Vittorio Moretti. Lucia's blood froze. Moretti. Raphael's family. I have something you'll want to see. About your father's death. The truth. A pause. Pier 19. 1 hour. Come alone or don't come at all. The line went dead. Every instinct screamed trap. But the mention of her father, the promise of truth, she couldn't walk away. Not from this. Pier 19 was abandoned. The old warehouse district, a graveyard of Naples' industrial past. Lucia approached slowly, every shadow a potential threat. A figure emerged from the darkness, silver-haired, distinguished, with eyes that reminded her painfully of Raphael. You came, Vittorio said, smiling. Good. You're smarter than my nephew gives you credit for. What do you want? Lucia demanded. To show you the truth. He held up a folder. Your father's real case file. The one the police buried. Do you know who ordered his death? Lucia's throat tightened. Raphael's father. No. Vittorio's smile widened. Me. I was consigliere then. I found the rat. I gave the order. And I've never regretted it. The admission hit like a physical blow. This man, not some faceless organization, but this man standing in front of her, had murdered her father. Why are you telling me this? She whispered. Because I'm going to destroy Raphael, and I want you to watch. Vittorio opened the folder, showing her photographs, her father beaten, pleading. Her stomach turned. He's weak, my nephew. He let you get close because he felt something for you. That weakness will be his end. You've been sabotaging him, Lucia said, pieces clicking together. The missing men. The stolen shipments. You framed him. I've been taking back what should have been mine. Vittorio's voice hardened. And you, dear girl, were the perfect distraction. While Raphael was busy playing protector to his enemy's daughter, I dismantled his empire. And Elena? Rage burned through Lucia's grief. Collateral damage. She was digging too close to the truth. He shrugged. Your fault, really. You involved her. The words were designed to break her. And they almost did. But then Lucia thought of her father. Not broken and begging as Vittorio wanted her to remember him, but strong, principled, telling his 17-year-old daughter that standing up for what's right always matters, even when it costs you everything. You're wrong about Raphael, Lucia said quietly. Vittorio laughed. Defending him? After he threw you out. He threw me out because I lied to him. Because I betrayed him. Lucia lifted her chin, clarity cutting through her pain. But he's not weak. He's been holding an empire together while you've been stabbing him in the back. He protected me when he didn't have to. He's nothing like you. How touching. Vittorio's expression turned cold. It doesn't matter. By morning, the authorities will have enough evidence to arrest him. His organization will crumble. And you'll be dead. He signaled and men emerged from the shadows, 4 of them weapons drawn. Lucia backed away, her mind racing. She'd walked into this trap knowing it was a trap, but she'd needed the confirmation. Now she had it. One question, she said, stalling. How did you know about me? I have eyes everywhere, including on Raphael's inner circle. Vittorio smiled. Poor Vincent. So loyal, so compromised. His gambling debts made him very cooperative. Vincent. The traitor was Vincent. A gunshot cracked the air. But it wasn't aimed at Lucia. One of Vittorio's men dropped, and suddenly the warehouse erupted in chaos. More shots. Shouting. Dark figures pouring in from multiple entrances. Raphael's men. And then Raphael himself, appearing like an avenging angel with a gun in his hand and murder in his eyes. He moved toward Vittorio with lethal purpose, but his uncle was already retreating, his remaining men providing cover. "This isn't over, nephew," Vittorio shouted before disappearing into the night. Raphael let him go, his priority shifting. He reached Lucia in 3 strides, his hands gripping her shoulders, his eyes searching her face with desperate intensity. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. "I'm fine. How did you? You think I'd let you walk away?" His voice was rough with emotion. "I had men following you from the moment you left. When I realized where you were going..." He stopped, his jaw clenching. "Lucia, I'm sorry. For what I said. For throwing you out. I was angry and..." "You had every right to be," Lucia interrupted. "I lied to you. I used you. Everything you said was true." "Not everything." Raphael's hand slid from her shoulders to her face, cradling it gently. "You couldn't fake what I saw in your eyes. What I felt when..." He stopped, struggling with words that clearly didn't come easily. "I know your father was Antonio Romano. I know you came here for revenge. But I also know that the woman who stood up to me in that restaurant, who argued with me about philosophy at midnight, who looked at me like I was more than just a criminal, that woman was real." Tears streamed down Lucia's face. "My father was killed by my uncle. I heard everything. He's been wearing a wire." Raphael gestured to one of his men, who held up a recording device. "We have his confession. About your father. About the sabotage. About Vincent. Vincent betrayed you. I know. He's already been dealt with." Raphael's expression was grim, but his touch remained gentle. "Lucia, I can't change the past. I can't bring your father back. But I can help you get justice. Real justice." "Why?" Lucia whispered. "Why would you help me after everything?" Raphael was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes searching hers in the dim light. "Because in the 3 days you were in my home, you made me want to be more than what I am. Because when I thought Vittorio might hurt you, I realized I'd burn my entire empire down to keep you safe." His voice dropped to something raw and honest. "Because somewhere between the wine and the gunfire, I fell in love with you." The confession hung in the air between them, impossible and perfect and terrifying. "I'm the daughter of a man your family killed," Lucia said, even as her heart soared. "I know. I came here to destroy you. I know. This is impossible. I know." Raphael's thumb brushed away her tears. "But when has that ever stopped either of us?" Lucia laughed through her tears, a sound halfway between joy and despair. Then she made her choice. Not for revenge, not for her father, but for herself. She kissed him. It was tentative at first, testing, questioning. But then Raphael's arms came around her, pulling her close, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like forgiveness and promise, and the beginning of something neither of them could have predicted. When they finally pulled apart, Lucia rested her forehead against his. "Vittorio killed my father. He killed Elena. I need him to pay for that." "He will," Raphael promised. "But we do this together. No more secrets. No more lies." "Together," Lucia agreed. Around them, Raphael's men were already moving, coordinating, planning. The final battle was coming. But for the first time since that terrible night 10 years ago, Lucia Romano wasn't alone. She had an ally, partner. And against all odds, against all reason, she had love. The turning point had come. Now it was time to finish this. The abandoned factory on the edge of Naples reeked of rust and betrayal. Lucia moved through the shadows with Raphael by her side, their weapons drawn, their breaths synchronized. 48 hours ago they'd been enemies. Now they were something else entirely. Partners bound by a common enemy and a truth that had changed everything. It had been Vincent who'd cracked. After Lucia discovered the inconsistencies in the evidence against Raphael, after she'd risked everything to warn him about the police raid, after they'd worked through the night piecing together the conspiracy, Vincent had finally broken under interrogation and revealed the truth. Vittorio Moretti, Raphael's uncle. The man everyone believed had died 5 years ago in a car bombing. He'd orchestrated everything. The attacks, the missing men, Elena's murder. And he'd been the one who ordered Antonio Romano's execution 10 years ago. "He's here," Raphael whispered, his hand briefly touching Lucia's arm. "Third floor. 20 men, maybe more." "We have 12, Lucia replied, checking her ammunition. The gun felt foreign in her hands, but Raphael had spent the last 2 days training her. "If we're doing this, you need to be able to protect yourself. 13 counting you." Raphael's gray eyes met hers in the darkness. "You don't have to do this. You can wait outside. Let me." "He killed my father," Lucia said quietly. "And Elena. I'm seeing this through." Raphael nodded, something like pride flickering across his face. Then he signaled to his men, and they moved. The assault was swift and brutal. Raphael's team had mapped every entrance, every corridor. They moved like shadows, taking out Vittorio's guards with precision. But the deeper they went, the more resistance they met. Gunfire erupted on the second floor. Lucia ducked behind a concrete pillar as bullets sparked off metal beams. Raphael was 10 feet ahead, returning fire, his movements fluid and deadly. This was his world, violence and strategy, and she saw him fully now, not the man who read philosophy at midnight, but the Don who'd survived in a world built on blood. "Lucia, move!" Raphael shouted. She ran, her heart hammering, following him up a rusted staircase. Behind them she heard shouts, the thunder of footsteps. They burst through a door onto the 3rd floor. A vast open space lit by flickering industrial lights. And there, in the center, stood Vittorio Moretti. He was older than Raphael by 20 years, silver-haired and distinguished, with the same sharp features but eyes that held nothing but calculated cruelty. He smiled as they entered, as if he'd been waiting for them. "Nephew," he said warmly, as if they were meeting for dinner. "And the lovely Signorina Romano. How poetic that you're together for this." "It's over, Vittorio," Raphael said, his gun trained on his uncle's chest. "Your men are dead or captured. The evidence of what you've done is already with the authorities." "Is it?" Vittorio's smile widened. "You mean the authorities I've owned for 30 years? The same ones who buried Antonio Romano's investigation." His gaze slid to Lucia. "Your father was so close to the truth, my dear. He discovered I'd been embezzling from my own family, building a shadow organization. He had to be eliminated." Rage flooded through Lucia like fire. "You murdered him." "He was a good man, and you murdered him." "I protected what was mine," Vittorio corrected. "Just as I'm protecting it now by removing the nephew who stole my birthright." "The family chose me," Raphael said coldly. "Because you're a coward who fakes his own death instead of fighting for what he wants." Vittorio's expression darkened. "I've been dismantling your empire for 5 years piece by piece. The missing shipments, the turned allies, and the perfect touch, using Antonio Romano's daughter to distract you while I struck." He pulled out a detonator. "This factory is wired to explode. We all die here, or you let me walk away." "You're bluffing," Raphael said. "Am I?" Vittorio pressed a button. Somewhere below, an explosion rocked the building. Alarms blared. That was the south wing. "In 5 minutes the rest goes. You can chase me or you can save your men. Choose." He backed toward a rear exit. Raphael's finger tightened on the trigger, but Lucia saw the calculation in his eyes. 20 men downstairs, loyal soldiers who'd followed him into this hell. "Go," Lucia said suddenly. "Get them out." "Lucia." "I'll stop him." She met Raphael's eyes, and in that moment, a lifetime of understanding passed between them. "Trust me." Raphael hesitated for one agonizing second, then nodded. Don't die. It sounded like a command and a plea. Then he was gone, shouting orders, his men thundering down the stairs. Lucia turned to Vittorio, who'd paused at the exit, amused. You think you can stop me, little girl? You're not even armed properly. No, Lucia agreed, lowering her gun. But I am wired. She tapped the small device clipped to her collar, the recording equipment Elena had given her months ago, that she'd worn every day since. Everything you just said. The confession about my father. The embezzlement. The shadow organization. It's all being transmitted to a very specific detective who's been waiting 10 years for this. Vittorio's face went white. Elena set up a dead man switch before she died. Lucia continued, the lie smooth and confident. If anything happened to her, all her research goes public. Every transaction. Every name. Every crime. She smiled coldly. You didn't kill a journalist, Vittorio. You martyred one. You're bluffing. Am I? Lucia echoed his words. In about 2 minutes, a team of federal agents who actually can't be bought are going to surround this building. You can run, but you won't get far. Or. She held up a pair of handcuffs she'd taken from one of the downed guards. You can surrender to me. Let me give my father the justice he deserved. Vittorio's hand moved inside his jacket. Lucia's gun came up instantly, but she wasn't fast enough. His weapon cleared leather, the barrel rising toward her. The shot echoed through the factory, but it wasn't Vittorio who fired. Raphael stood in the doorway, smoke curling from his gun, his face carved from stone. Vittorio stumbled backward, a red bloom spreading across his chest. He looked down at the wound, then up at his nephew with something like surprise. You shot me, he gasped. You killed an innocent man, Raphael said quietly, walking forward. You murdered a cop who was just doing his job. You killed a young woman who wanted nothing but the truth. And you tried to destroy everything my father built. He stood over his uncle, his expression pitiless. This is me protecting my family. Vittorio collapsed, his breathing shallow. In the distance, sirens wailed, real ones this time, getting closer. Raphael turned to Lucia. My men are out. The building's clear. He looked at his uncle's body. It's finished. Lucia felt the weight of 10 years lift from her shoulders. Elena's research. It really does exist. She sent it to me before she died. Everything we need to dismantle what he built. And me? Raphael asked quietly. Does it implicate me? Lucia met his eyes. Yes. But. She took a breath. I think there's another way. The federal agents arrived to find Vittorio Moretti dead, and a warehouse full of evidence. Over the following weeks, Lucia worked with the authorities, providing Elena's research. Raphael made a deal, testimony against Vittorio's network in exchange for immunity for crimes committed under his father's rule. It wasn't perfect justice. It wasn't clean. But it was something. On a rainy Thursday evening, Lucia stood at her father's grave, finally able to tell him the truth. I got him, Papa. The man who killed you. It's over. She felt Raphael's presence before she saw him, his footsteps soft on the wet grass. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said. I gave you my word. Raphael stood beside her, looking down at the headstone. Antonio Romano, beloved father, hero. He was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry. For what happened to him. For what my family did. You didn't pull the trigger. No. But I benefited from the empire built on his death. On hundreds of deaths. Raphael's voice was heavy. I'm trying to change that. It won't be overnight, but I'm trying. Lucia believed him. Over the past weeks, she'd seen him dismantle the most violent parts of his operations, redirect money to the communities his family had exploited, work with the authorities instead of against them. It wasn't redemption, not yet, but it was a start. What happens now? She asked. To us. Raphael turned to face her, and for once, his mask was completely gone. She saw all of him, the criminal and the philosopher, the killer and the protector, The man who'd saved her life and the heir to the empire that had destroyed it. I don't know, he admitted. We've been through hell together. We've been enemies and allies. But what we are now. He reached out, his hand finding hers. I know what I want us to be. Lucia's heart hammered. Raphael. I love you, he said simply. I know it's impossible. I know it's complicated. I know every reason why we shouldn't work. But I've spent my whole life doing what's logical and strategic, and it left me empty. You make me want to be better. You make me feel alive. Tears streamed down Lucia's face. I came here to destroy you. I know. Everything I am is built on hating what you represent. I know. This is insane. I know. Raphael's thumb brushed away her tears. But when has that ever stopped either of us? Lucia laughed through her tears, the sound breaking free like a bird from a cage. Then she kissed him, there in the rain beside her father's grave, and it felt like forgiveness and promise and the beginning of something neither of them could have predicted. The war was over. Justice had been served. And against all odds, against all reason, love had found a way. The rain had stopped by the time they left the cemetery, leaving the city washed clean and glistening under the streetlights. Lucia and Raphael walked side by side, their fingers intertwined, neither speaking but both feeling the weight of what had been spoken. At the cemetery gates a car waited. Vincent stood beside it, no longer Raphael's consigliere, but a man facing his own reckoning with the law. He'd cooperated fully, his testimony crucial in unraveling Vittorio's network. He nodded respectfully as they approached. The last of Vittorio's associates have been arrested, Vincent reported. The organization is dismantled. It's over, Don Moretti. Raphael looked at him for a long moment. I'm not Don Moretti anymore, Vincent. That empire died with my uncle. He glanced at Lucia. I'm building something different now. Vincent's expression flickered with something like relief. Then I wish you well, Raphael. Both of you. He got into the car and drove away, leaving them alone on the quiet street. What will you build? Lucia asked softly. Raphael turned to her, his gray eyes clear and certain. Legitimate businesses. Investments that help this city instead of bleeding it. It won't erase the past, but it's a future I can live with. He cupped her face gently. A future I want you in. If you'll have me. Lucia's heart swelled. She thought of her father, of the man he'd been, principled, forgiving, always believing people could change. She thought of Elena, who told her once that revenge was a prison and love was the only key that fit the lock. I spent 10 years planning your destruction, Lucia said, her voice thick with emotion. And somehow, you became my salvation instead. We saved each other, Raphael corrected. He pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. You showed me I could be more than my family name, more than the violence I inherited. And you showed me that justice doesn't always look like revenge, Lucia whispered. That sometimes the bravest thing is choosing to forgive. They stood there on the empty street, two people who'd been forged in fire and found each other in the ashes. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be trials, questions, people who'd never understand how the daughter of a murdered cop could love the heir to the empire that killed him. But Lucia had learned something crucial. That love wasn't about perfection or logic. It was about choosing someone every single day, even when the world said you shouldn't. Come home with me, Raphael said. Not to a safe house or a villa. To wherever you want to go. We'll build it together. Lucia smiled, genuine and bright, the first truly free smile she'd worn in a decade. Home sounds perfect. As they walked into the Naples night, the city lights spread before them like possibilities. The ghosts of their pasts would always be there, but they no longer had the power to haunt. Justice had been served. Truth had won. And two broken people had found each other and become whole. Lucia Romano had come to Naples for revenge and found redemption instead. Raphael Moretti had been born into darkness and chosen to walk toward the light. Together they would write a different story. One of healing, hope, and love that conquered even the deepest hate. The waitress who'd threatened a mafia boss had won her war. But the real victory wasn't in his destruction. It was in their transformation. And that, in the end, was the greatest justice of all. We have come to the end of the story. Thank you for watching to the end. Share your opinion about this story in the comments below. I like getting feedback from my audience. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our heartwarming stories.